Welcome to the Gentleman Badass podcast. We've got a special episode for you today. A lot of firsts in this episode. This will be their first on-location interview. We're actually in the beautiful Sandhills of Nebraska in the city of Ord at Scratchtown Brewing. And it's also the first episode that I've done without Mick. Mick wanted to make the trip, but he couldn't. He's got other stuff going on this weekend. This is also going to be the first episode where I'm drinking beer. Hopefully not the last. But we're all drinking beer here at Scratchtown. You don't do an interview in a tap room of a brewery without drinking beer. So I'm drinking what is it called? Nebraska Backroads.
Yeah.
It's a brown ale, and
American
it's actually
brown.
made with local hops. So today I have got two of the owners of Scratchtown Brewing. I've got Caleb Pollard and Mike, is it Klimek?
Yeah.
Is that how? Okay.
Close
Mike Klimek.
enough.
Perfect. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about getting their business started. We're going to talk about beer, and we're going to talk about some other fun stuff. So, guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks to it.
Yeah,
Glad
thank
to be
you.
here, man.
So we're going to start. This will be kind of a new feature for the podcast. I want to start with a little icebreaker, kind of get the tongue flowing, if you will, and get the rapport up. So I'm just going to ask kind of a not necessarily a silly question, but a question that'll make you think and talk. So the question of the day is, what was your first car, and what did you love about it, and what did you hate about it? So whoever wants to go first.
I can start with that. I
All
loved
right.
it. It was a 1986 Ford Tempo,
Nice.
4-door. And I loved it because it wasn't a nice car and I didn't have to treat it as such. So
Okay.
I remember stories in the winter. We would get out of school, and when I grew up, Ord had one basketball gym. So the girls and the boys had to fight for practice time. So sometimes you'd have practice right after school. Sometimes you'd have practice starting at 5:30. So when we had the late practices, we would get in my car. Hopefully my mom probably is not going to hear this story, but and then we would pile the whole backseat floorboards full of snow and then go drive around and have snowball fights with other
Wow.
cars and people and whoever. And, it might stay in there for a few days, and then it was ice at that point in time. And I remember doing a lot of neutral rev up, throwing it to drive burnouts and things like that. So it wasn't the coolest car, and I still don't drive the coolest car, but it was a fun car.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Caleb?
I was a Ford man as well. I drove a 1990 Ford Ranger. It was a manual transmission. So the two things I loved about it the most was, one, it was mine. I slaved at a job at Kentucky Fried Chicken, slinging chicken to be able to buy that car. It was my first car, and I bought it with my own money. And at 16 years of age, you learned that when you wrecked it 3 weeks later in a ice storm, because we're both December babies, both Mike and I are.
Okay.
That you also had to pay for said improvements or repairs to your own car. I also enjoyed having a manual transmission. I learned how to drive on a manual transmission, both on the farm where I grew up, and then as well as in Kearney when I was 16 at the time. And I miss driving manual transmission vehicles.
Yeah.
I really I miss the driving experience that they provide. So I think for me, and it was only a 2-seater, maybe a 3, so we didn't get in as much trouble in that pickup as Mike may have, but we drove that pickup until literally it fell apart and died.
Awesome.
So.
Love it. Perfect. Yeah, those are great stories. So I think that gives a little insight already into your background, but for all of our guests, we like to get into the background, kind of where you started out, what you were like growing up, what you were like in school. So Mike, tell us a little bit about growing up for you.
I grew up here in Ord, high school graduate in 1994. I played football, basketball, track, had fun, did a little bit of stuff, never really got in any trouble. There's a reason we have a beer called MMR. It's Minimum Maintenance Road. It's
Yeah.
the little roads outside of Ord where, people get in shenanigans. Really enjoyed sports, hanging out with the people we did. I don't want to pat myself on the back, but did really well in school. So that was important to me and my folks. Ended up getting a Board of Regents scholarship to Kearney.
Okay.
So I had my tuition paid for.
Awesome.
Really thought I was going to be a psychologist. That was coming out of school. I'm going to be a psych major. took a few classes in that the first year, and all my professors said, well, you're going to need to get your doctorate. And I said, well, no, that's not for me, I guess. So bounced around a little bit at UNK and ended up with a business degree with a finance emphasis.
Okay.
And when I was in Kearney, I was working at the bank there, and then that proceeded into a job in Omaha for First National Bank, where I worked the majority of my corporate career. So from 99 till 2010 or so, I worked there.
Okay.
Enjoyed it, loved Omaha, still love Omaha, but from 25 to 35, that was a great place to live. Like a lot of concerts, culture, restaurants, movies, all those things. And got laid off from there about the time I had a 2 and a 1 year old and a wife who had just finished her nursing degree and started her job. And went a while, had a hard time, getting leads. Like I said, that was, the financial downturn. And when you're in the finance industry, the jobs were few and far between. Throughout that point, relating back to where we're at, I had been homebrewing.
Okay.
Just something I like to do, taking raw materials and creating something that people enjoy doing, because in my corporate job, it was very unfulfilling. It was a lot of,
Vaporware.
making money for another place, for one. Like, whether I work hard or not, I get paid the same, and they make their money.
Right.
There was not a lot of visceral satisfaction from a job well done. So the home brewing was just kind of something to do when I was home that, I might have spent a day doing this or however many days, and then the fermentation and the packaging and everything. At least at that point when I was done, I had something I enjoyed and I could watch other people enjoy. And really not in the front of my head, but I think that was pointing me this way. Like I said, around that time I was laid off. We lost my dad here in town, and it just started to get to the point where we wanted to maybe change our lifestyle, change where we're at. My wife's from Atkinson, Nebraska, which is north of Ord, about an hour, 20 minutes or so, depending if my wife's driving or if I'm driving. She'll get there a little quicker. And I was, Omaha had that old, I can't even remember their name, it's the old football team that played at Rosenblatt. And I was at a tailgate there talking to some friends of ours, and I offhandedly asked, got any jobs at the hospital for my wife? And sure enough, the girl I was talking to worked in here in Ord at the hospital, which at that point in time was maybe a year or two old. Hooked us up. I told my wife, I said, there's an option for us to move back home, because we wanted to move somewhere smaller. We wanted to get out of the rat race, for lack of a better term, or, thinking about our kids in those schools being from small towns. It's hard to wrap your head around class size and not knowing the parents and that. And we never actively sought out Ord. It's just, that's what happened. We just knew we wanted to. We looked at other small towns outside of Omaha where she could maybe stay in her job at that point. But we talked about moving back here, and I told her, I said, I want to make sure you want to do it, because I don't want you to come back here and feel like it's for me and then not like my hometown. So it ended up working out really great. She is the operating room manager here at the hospital and has been virtually since we got back. She kind of had a couple different jobs. But at that point, I didn't have anything planned. I still didn't have a job. I sent my resume and some information to the economic development department here in town, which at that point, Caleb was the director.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, I said, can you pass this around to the banks or whoever? And again, didn't get a lot of traction on that. A former classmate of mine had a computer repair shop that he had bought from someone else here in town. And I just ran into him somewhere else and said, hey, I'm moving back to Ord. What do you got? And I hadn't done anything like that before. Did some computer repair, still homebrewing. Shared some with Caleb because we had made a connection through me trying to get back here. And Caleb said, well, gosh, why don't why don't we start a brewery? And I said, well, because it's Ord, Nebraska, and it's Busch Light Town.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah, baby.
was.
But yeah, it just got the ball rolling for Scratchtown.
You know, that you mentioned concerts. That kind of reminds me. You were posting a bunch of your ticket stubs on Facebook a while back, and we were at the same Creed concert.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, I don't know. There's probably half a dozen to 10 people that I'm friends with for other reasons that were like, I was at that show. I was at that show. And, you know, and we still, like a couple weeks ago, I was at Stir to go see a show. I really love that stuff, and that's kind of some of the stuff I miss, but that's also stuff that we try to do here for the town, and maybe even more so for us, having music, having food events, having different things. You know we can't have everything, but like if we facilitate it, maybe we can have some of that stuff here in a small town.
That's awesome. I love that. So Caleb, were you from Ord? Or?
No, I'm not from Ord originally. Okay. I claim it now. So my story could be probably more different than Mike's origin story here in Ord. I moved 4 times between the ages of 0 and 18, so I don't really consider very many places home other than Ord. We've lived in Ord longer now, 11 years, than we've lived anywhere else. I have anyways, anywhere else in my life. And I'll be 40 this year, so it kind of tells you the increments in which we bounced around. But I started off as a kid growing up on a farm in southeast Nebraska, west of Nahaka, Nebraska. My family founded that town, and we were farming both my dad's farm and then the family homestead when in 1990 we had a very acrimonious family fight over essentially succession after my great-grandfather passed away. And my dad said, to hell with farming. I didn't get through the 80s to get stabbed in the back by my family. So we packed up, moved to Kearney, Nebraska, right at the tail end of 1990, and my dad went to college at 32 years of age, and we lived in Kearney for 7 years. And what was funny, you know, we talk about being at the same concert, so Mike and I were living in the same town at the same time when I was living in Kearney in high school, and he was going to college here. Mike's 4 years older than I am. 4
You gotta
years.
throw that in.
Yes, 4 years older. He's an old man.
10% older.
He's a broken
He's got
old
way
man.
more gray hair.
I do have way more gray hair. There's a reason for it. Anyways, so, and then halfway through my junior year of high school, my dad got an offer from the Mayo Clinic to go work there. And so we packed up and moved to Rochester, and I was only in Minnesota a year and a half. And prior to moving up there, I couldn't wait to get out of Nebraska. I couldn't wait to go and see the world and get an education somewhere else. And then after being gone a year and a half, I couldn't wait to get back to Nebraska. And I was hellbound to get back to Nebraska, and did, and came back in 98 after graduating high school to go to the University of Nebraska. And that's where I spent way too much time and money partying, learning how to talk to people, as I like to tell my parents,
there you go.
at Kager's. Only 2 pushes and then a nice pour at 45 degrees, and learned, honest to goodness, how to network and how to talk to people through a myriad of different college experiences I had there. I was originally what we call a dual matriculation major. I was an environmental studies major and a biosystems engineering. And then by the time I hit organic chemistry, I realized that I didn't want to be in a lab anymore, and I wasn't really cut out for the technical side of the science world. I love science. I have a deep passion and love for science and scientific discovery, but I was better and more effective at articulating that rather than necessarily studying it. I'm a talker, not a thinker, Mike.
Yeah, I've noticed.
But
Thank
what
God.
I ended up doing, you're welcome. What I ended up doing is creating my own major in college. I actually read the handbook, the student bulletin that they give you of all the classes that you can take in every program in the university. Period. I read the whole thing cover to cover. I swear to God I did, because I was finding myself in college. I'm still trying to find myself, but we're at Scratchtown Brewing Company right now.
Yeah.
But I found a really interesting program called Individualized Program of Study, and then that discovery changed my life, changed my trajectory, and led me to get back into rural development, into rural economic development, through a series of internships and experiences I had on the tail end of my college career. And that's really kind of how I got connected with Ord, at a very young age at 21. Excuse me. So went through the remainder of my program, got my education, got a BA from the University of Nebraska, an individualized program of study with an emphasis on international sustainable development. Because at that time, what I wanted to do was travel the world and do international relief work in areas that had ecological disaster or unsustainable economic activity. Okay. And at the tail end of college, I met my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And after about 3 years of dating, we had an unexpected but very blessed surprise, which was our oldest son. And so we quickly got married after we found out we were pregnant with Callan. And what we wanted to do was to go into the Peace Corps and start out our career that way. And that changed very quickly. When you have a dependent, you can't do that. And that really set me towards economic development as a career. I was in the private sector for a short time. Like Mike, right out of college, I worked for a .com that .bombed. And one of the things we might talk about later is, have you ever been a part of a business that's failed? And I have, from a very intimate standpoint. And I have some insight in which I can share on that. But worked for the .com, it .bombed, was out of work for a while, and was doing graduate level prep work to go to graduate school, because that's what you do when you can't find work, is
keep going to school.
Keep going to school and bringing on more debt. I mean, that's the American dream, right? And then I got a phone call from somebody in a private sector business in Lincoln in sales and marketing, and we're like, you're a good fit for us. We'd like to bring you in for an interview, and things really took off from there. From that, then I had an opportunity to transition into economic development, which was what I went to school for, with one of my old bosses through an internship I had. And what that allowed me to do is to really get a full breadth and a full understanding of economic growth and development in the state of Nebraska, but especially in rural communities. And I have a real passion for working and building community, especially in places in which I come from. I'm a small town kid at heart, and even though we didn't live on the farm longer than 11 years, it left an indelible mark on me as a person and as someone who wanted to, with my wife, raise our kids in an environment that was a lot more community centric. And about I would say a handful of years into that career, I was actively looking for an executive level position in a rural community that I felt had a future. And at that time, I was doing a small side project here in Ord, and the outgoing economic development director told me, I'm going to be leaving this position. I think you'd be a good fit. Why don't you apply? And I did, and we got the job, and then we had the decision to make. My wife's from Omaha. I've never lived in a town smaller than Lincoln before, and I'm going to haul her out into the middle of where?
Yeah. Everywhere,
the
middle
right?
of everywhere.
That's exactly right. But what we wanted what I call an authentic community experience. We wanted our kids to literally be raised by the village. You know what I mean? And a lot of the trepidations we had in terms of considering a move here, as we spent our time in Ord, and as we as adults grew up in Ord, we started to see a lot of those concerns were put to rest, and you started to see a lot of the aspects of moving here that we wanted for our children and for ourselves, which was very community centric. It's for people that don't know where Ord is, we're 65 miles north of civilization, essentially, on the southeastern edge of the Sandhills. So we're 65 miles northwest of Grand Island, 75 miles northeast of Kearney. But it is in what I think one of the most beautiful places in all of the United States. It's a gorgeous part of the universe up here, and there's a work ethic and there's an ethos out here. I call it a new pioneering ethic. Is that there are a lot of really exciting activities and entrepreneurs that are promoting a bootstrap mentality out here that I gravitated towards as economic development director, but also started to realize that it might be the salvation of this area and this community to have a focus on entrepreneurship and have a focus on business creation and what we call business churn. And the longer I've lived here in Ord, and as we've started and grown Scratchtown, the more I start to see that there might be some salvation for America in the story of the repioneering ethic. And I think that that's something that gets completely ignored in conversation about what America needs and what how you solve a lot of these endemic problems in America. But overall, it was a move for us to raise our family, to to start a new chapter in our careers. And also, too, my career was taking off in the eastern part of the state, and it was coming. There was a price that was being paid for that. And that was my marriage. And I, to this day, absolutely adore my wife and, love my wife. And I wanted to not have bad things happen in the marriage. Right. And we wanted to start over out here, too. And that was a good opportunity for us to do that. And then totally happenstance, like 2 years in, Mike looks me up and says, "Hey, man, I'm looking to move back." And I think at the time, before he had even moved back, we started talking about homebrewing through email. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Man, you should start a brewery." And he's like, "You're effing crazy." And I said, "Well, yeah, probably, but..."
I said, "You're fucking crazy."
Yeah.
Let's get that F word out of the way.
And I said, you're right, I am, but I think it'd be something this town really could use. And then we started talking back and forth and found out we were both homebrewers. And that's when things really kind of took off from there. Okay. But I think in between that time, too, when his dad was sick, we didn't know about this until much later. This is a crazy story. This is a crazy story. Like I said, my dad's in healthcare. Well, after we moved away, all my family, except for one of my brothers, moved back to Nebraska over time. Mm-hmm. And during all of the formation and conversation Mike and I were having about Scratchtown, his dad had already passed away. Well, at that time, when his dad had passed away, my dad was working at Good Samaritan Hospital and took care of his dad.
Wow. Took care of my dad.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So we didn't know this until after we had agreed to start Scratchtown. His mom told us that and was like, "Yo, Mary, like, if we're looking for a sign, you could have said something, right?"
You could have brought that up.
Yeah, you could have brought that up. It would have been nice to know if it was really meant to be, Michael.
Yeah.
We crossed paths.
We did.
It wasn't just that Goldfinger show back in Kearney.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we're both at the same Goldfinger show in Kearney back in like '96. I love punk and so awesome. Yeah. So I mean, that's one of the things that I think in this whole story of Scratchtown, and especially with Mike and I, is there's just a lot of there's a lot of cosmic energy, and there's a lot of, I think, karma that it's at work that brings people together. And the one thing that I've really recognized is, as much as we try to control, especially me, try to control the outcomes of what we want to see in life, life's a lot more like surfing, where you have to give up control in order to maintain presence.
I like that.
And to enjoy the wave. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's been a really hard lesson for me to learn, because I wanted, X, Y, and Z to happen, and that's not how life works, especially in our business.
Oh yeah.
And it was really, really rewarding for me to see us take a step back and see these natural relationships grow and develop. And then, starting year 7 today, it is our birthday at Scratchtown Brewing Company. Starting year 7 today is a pretty fun experience, and to be able to talk about it is, I think, even more fun.
That's awesome. So this next question just kind of popped up. It's in line with kind of the questions that I've sent you ahead of time, but you talk about kind of the repioneering idea. And I've thought about this myself, because I grew up in a town of 350 people. And it seems like the cost of living is so much smaller in small towns. It seems like it would be a great place to start a business.
It is.
Especially in like today's connected society. So in that idea, like, is the cost of business a lot smaller in small towns? I'm sure some things are easier, some things are harder. Mm-hmm. What if someone's thinking about, especially a brick and mortar, where their property or anything like that?
Which is a huge part of a lot of what businesses have to incur in terms of cost. It is significantly, I think, easier, and you have a higher rate of success if you start a business in a small town or a rural community. And I will go to my grave believing that. It doesn't mean that you can't work as hard or you don't work as hard. I think oftentimes you have to hustle even more. But the reality is that there is a tremendous demand for goods, services, skills, and experiences out here. And the barrier, the literal cost and the barrier to entry is much, much lower. You do deal with different circumstances that put pressures on your business, either workforce-wise or financially or regulatory-wise.
Some of the hurdles are, the people we rely on to help us do things. A lot of times bigger cities will have,
colleges that they can recruit, wait staff for example. Or, but like, it was funny because when we started Scratchtown, not only do we, own the business, but I own a second business that owns the real estate. And we're one of the very few breweries in the state that owns its own real estate, but I don't think there's a single brewery in the cities that owns their real estate. I think they all lease. And if I'm mistaken, I apologize to any Lincoln and Omaha breweries, but the breweries that own their real estate are the ones out in the 3rd district, the 3rd congressional district. They're all out in rural Nebraska. And a lot of the times the reason why we own our own real estate is there is not speculative property in which we can operate in. So we have to be able to literally build the spaceship while we're trying to fly it. And then also, it provides an additional asset for you as a business owner as you grow the business, and it looks well, of course, on the balance sheet. But I also think too is there is a tremendous amount of pride, and there's a tremendous amount of loyalty and patience that rural folk have towards their rural entrepreneurs that I just don't see elsewhere. Is we have the same customers and new and more customers than when we started 6 years ago. But the fierce loyalty that they have to not just our brand, to our beer, but to us as people is really incredible. And I think that is one major differential from us and other businesses in our industry segment. And what I oftentimes tell people, and we can talk about the formation of Scratchtown and how crazy people thought we were because we were literally on the end of nowhere. But what I told people is if you can tell a compelling story, you present a great experience, and most importantly, you're a great operator and you can make great beer, we're going to be able to, in my opinion, to kill it out here. And we have, because what we've made is a destination for national beer travelers. We've made it a destination for Omaha and Lincoln and Tri-City weekend warriors. And we've made it, most importantly to us, I think, a communal space a communal space in our community for our people to come together and break bread. And I always like to say our bread happens to be beer. Yeah. And it really hits on a lot of these elemental things from the human experience that people are looking for that oftentimes don't find it in modern society for a number of different reasons. And using technology like we are today, or using social media, we're taking the camera and we're pointing it on those experiences and saying we can do just as good of a job, if not better, than any other brewery in the country out here in a place in which we love, that is our home, and it's meaningful, and we can use this vehicle, this brewery, as an agent of positive transformation through fermentation. And that's essentially, what we've been doing, for 6 years.
I like that. So jumping back to Mike then, and I want to get to the business failure. We'll talk about that for sure. But we talk about home brewing, and then I love that. What did you say?
Positive transformation through fermentation.
All right.
Should trademark that.
So
I should.
It's amazing. There you go. So hopefully you can see on the camera, but there's a nice little poster of Mike. Mike's the head brewer here. It should be right behind Mike's camera. If not, we'll make sure we'll get a picture.
Block it.
So you started home brewing. Let's talk a little bit about.
I had just through, like a lot of other brewers have, ended up, it was called a Mr. Beer kit. It's a little brown plastic keg, and you mixed hot water and a can of syrup, and then that was your beer, basically. Tried like 3 batches on that. Just wasn't what I was looking for. Like I said before, I was looking for something that I could put work into that was creative and enjoyable, and that wasn't it. So quit working for several years, or quit brewing for a couple years. Quit working for a year. Not my choice. And
I love how he says he'd like to put work into something and see something positive come out of it. I'm like the whole time, you're kids.
Well, at this point, I didn't have any.
Okay, that's true. Yes.
So
that was after Mr. Beer.
Yeah, and I put work into those. But anyway, and I, still working in the bank in Omaha, and a coworker of mine said, hey, I got this catalog. It's a homebrew catalog from another place, because there's different ways you can do this. And I kind of started with, they call it the stovetop method. It's a little bit more control, a little bit of grain, a little bit of loose hops, but still some of the extract syrups and things like that. And, was really enjoying it. Of course, you hand all your friends and family a beer. They're like, oh, this is great. Well, you just handed them a free beer.
Right.
And me being the self-critiquing person that I am, I'm like, well, this is, that's not honest feedback. So I took a beer that I thought was that I liked, and I entered it into the Nebraska State Fair contest. And this is this is an extract syrup made beer. Got some good feedback. That's what I wanted, was good feedback, but also got, some recognition for it, and just kind of went from there and got really OCD on it, and went, I'm going to add this piece of equipment. I'm going to add this piece of equipment. I'm going to make this aspect of it more under my control. I'm going to, monitor the fermentation a lot better. I'm going to monitor my yeast a lot better, and just kind of really just slowly, affordably as I could. Again, starting a family, buying a house, wife starting a new job. Just as I could, I just kept adding more control over the home brewing that I could, and again, continued to enter some stuff for the feedback. A little bit of recognition was nice.
A little bit of recognition. He fails to say that he's one of the most decorated homebrewers to come out of Omaha, Nebraska ever.
Wow.
I don't know if I would say that, but
I will. 22 awards at the state, regional, and national level. I think
awesome.
that's worth its weight.
Yeah.
He doesn't say that, but what I will fast forward quickly to is that Scratchtown would not exist had he not done those things. I was looking for a business partner to start Scratchtown. I wasn't looking for a schmuck. I was looking for somebody that was as good as him.
but you got both.
I got a well accomplished schmuck as a business partner. Thank you.
I mean, I don't have any. I'm be the first one to tell you I'm not trained in brewing. Everything we do here, I taught myself through either Facebook or home brewing, or not Facebook, YouTube or home brewing, or reading a lot of text. And it's just something that we just slowly built up. The first few years I would kind of joke, we're a home brewery on steroids, because we are one of the smallest per volume production breweries in the state per batch. Yearly production, we're top third. But it's just, we kind of take a different angle at it, and it's just something that just really fit well with me. I love the creative part of it. I love the scientific part of it. I love that my picky OCD part of my personality is rewarded. And I like that I can watch my hard work be enjoyed by other people, which is something for several years in, a few different jobs was never the case. So that to me, entrepreneur wise, never in my blood. I'm very risk averse, but the thought of being able to do something I love and watch people enjoy it is what kind of tipped the tide for me.
Okay.
Well, and also too, like I'm gonna pick on that a little bit, because you got shit on in your last job, just like I got shit on in my last job, and we were tired of getting shit on by people. We were tired of busting our ass, like he was saying, working for other people with not just a begrudging level of acknowledgement that you did your task, whether you did it well was irrelevant. And at that time, I was doing some serious kick-ass work in economic development in this town, and didn't feel like I was getting a fair shake from the powers that be. And I'll be honest with everybody on this podcast, small towns can be their own worst enemy. And even as great as Ord is, it's got some real schmucks, if we really want to talk about it, that impede progress that was necessary for this community to be in existence in 50 years. And that's the argument I would make with a lot of people, is the decisions we're making will affect the next 50 to 100 years of existence of this community. And we just got tired of working for, I think, situations that were both uncreative and non-visionary. And the argument I made to Mike when we were talking about starting Scratchtown is, would you rather do this at a relatively young age, and if we lose everything at a relatively young age, but we don't die with a life of regret? And that was something that's always been really important to me, is no matter now, we'd start year 7, no matter now what happens at Scratchtown, we did it. And we hung a few medals on the wall, 10 to be exact, and professional national homebrew, listen to me, professional national commercial brewing competitions, and made a little money along the way and made a lot of people happy. And I think that overall, and we have full-time employees now. We brought a kid back from Ord that was in Georgia brewing for Terrapin Brewing. I mean, we've done a lot of things that when you listen to what people think you should do in a small town to build its future, we've done those things. And they're things that are important to sustain and grow the community that exists out here. That's our home. I mean, that's the one thing I think that...
That's one thing, like, that always touches me more than any of the other is when I have the older people in town come in and they'll say, you know, a lot of people in this state or even in the country wouldn't know what Ord is without us. And I don't, you know, I always take it with a grain of salt, but I also take it with some pride, you know, because I am happy for that. I am happy that people will take their weekend to drive here 3 hours because of us. And they might spend money at, even if it's just at the gas station to turn home, or if they stay overnight somewhere. You know, small towns like this have to have outside money to survive. And,
they do.
And if we can help do that, and again, with the entertainment that we bring and the enjoyment of the beer and the community atmosphere, the tap room and everything, that is as satisfying to me as about anything, in my opinion, of what we've done here.
Well, and that, I think, attitude dictates outcome too. I mean, positive psychology has been proven to positively affect people's lives if they frame, you know, their lives through ways in which they can succeed and build on their strengths, and then focus their energy and their resources in enhancing those strengths. Well, communities are the same damn way, because they exist as a collective of people, right? And I think one of the things that's been rewarding for us too is to see how attitudes can change about how cool and fun and enjoyable and rewarding and fulfilling it can be to live out here in the sticks and do what you love and not be compromising about it. Be uncompromising about what your value structure is, and to build a business you can be proud of that is predicated on all of these goals and these core values that you have as a human being, especially when it comes to the place that you're from. You know, we're both Nebraska boys to the bone. My family's story is in the foundation of the state, and I wanted to re-implement those ideas of pioneering in this community, and Scratchtown's been a great example of that, and it's changed people's attitude, I think, about what's not only possible out here, but that you can do things that are creatively different. And the more creatively different you push them, being where
we're at isn't a hindrance, it's a positive.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, from when I grew up, and they've done a great job in this town since I left town. They developed the economic development department and a lot of the entrepreneur programs. But like when I was young in the mid to late 90s, even before that, I mean, growing up here or growing up in any small town was a hindrance. And
you were told to get out.
And I think it's starting to flip that it is more of a positive. I don't know how many of my friends, when I told everyone that I was moving back here, were jealous. And I don't know how many friends that we've brought back since. And it's just something that wasn't the case. I mean, it seems like a short time ago, but you know, in the whole history of the state and of the town, it was a short time ago that everyone thought that, you know, it's a hindrance to be in a small community. And I think, hopefully, you know, I think it's flipped a little bit the other way.
Well, I think people are starting to wake up and realize that you don't have to be a rat in the rat race, living in a cul-de-sac. No offense. That when you're
none taken.
But like, I mean, you know, it's the cookie cutter experience that you're told to go out and do. And the supreme level of dissatisfaction that people have with their lives in modern American society today is a perfect, I think, outgrowth of that, is that you should go and do these predicated things that make you miserable. You sit in a cubicle and you're miserable. You sit in traffic and you're miserable. You sit and you do these things because you're supposed to and you're miserable. And I have never been happier making less money, but doing much more rewarding things than what we've done with Scratchtown. And I'll go back to this piece of this positive transformation through fermentation.
Trademark.
I grew up on that farm that made it through the 80s crisis and then had a family destroy it. And I wanted to get back at some point in time and contribute back in a positive way to agriculture in this state. And Scratchtown's given us that vehicle to do that. You know, like we were talking before we got, you know, on the air here, you know, we've got 3 beers on tap that have ingredients that came from 5 miles away. You know, we have 1 beer on tap here that's all Nebraska ingredients. Like, at some point in time in America, or it is the microcosm, if you want to see an outcome that's different than what the status quo is today, you yourself have to step up and start working to make some small finite change to make those things happen. And I always tell people when we started Scratchtown and we sought to do the things that we wanted to do, we didn't want to change the world, we just wanted to change Ord. Mm-hmm. And I think you can change the world by doing things like that. Mm-hmm. And I know it might sound still a little naive, or at least a little hopeless, given the context of the greater conversations of what's going on in the world today. But I think that is this kind of self-defeatist attitude that we heard when we wanted to start Scratchtown. Mm. And all these years later, look at what we've done in such a short amount of time. And like I tell people, we're just getting started. Like, just wait and see what happens with what we're doing out here over the course of the next 20 to 30 years if we're given the privilege to do that. Mm. And that's the thing that has been, I think, the most rewarding aspect of what we've done, is to see that change in attitude, that change in belief, that not only can you control your destiny to a degree, but you can also make a positive difference doing it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So let's get into that then. Let's just get into the beginning of the business. So you two meet, you're impressed by his brewing credentials. Mm-hmm. Where does it go from there?
Well, we both had traveled quite a bit up until that point and visited a number of breweries around the country. And right before I had met him, I had spent some time in Moab, Utah on vacation. Moab's not much bigger than Ord, and it's located in the middle of the south central Utah desert. But it's ringed by a number of national parks, and the Colorado River goes right through Moab, and it is a outdoor enthusiast mecca. It had 2 breweries, kick-ass experience. We went water rafting, went hiking, did a ton of stuff out there, and had a blast. And we were living in Ord at the time, and we came back, and I said, I really think a brewery could work here after that experience. And then we went to Boulevard Brewing Company shortly after that with some friends, and that's when I told my wife, I'm starting a brewery in Ord, Nebraska. I just got to figure out how to build the right team. Because I was a home brewer, traveled a lot. I love fermentation. We dabble in fermentation outside of beer on our own time at home. And it's a fascinating process because, like Mike, I also like taking raw ingredients and seeing something enjoyable as the outgrowth of that. I love to cook, and he knows this. And so what I wanted to do was to build something that played on interests that I had, but also from a pure economic development standpoint, Ord is centrally located, like Moab, to area amenities that bring a tremendous amount of people through the area a year. We're ringed by 4 area lakes, all within 20 miles driving distance, each direction out of town. We have the nicest white sand beaches in the state, better than McConaughey. Yeah, you heard that, Ogallala. But we also have Davis Creek, we have Sherman Reservoir, and we have Lake Erickson. Tremendous outdoor recreation opportunities, and those were already bringing hundreds of thousands of visitors through the area a year. And as economic development director, I'm sitting here looking at this data going, a brewery would be a perfect capture opportunity for not only my own interest, but also to capitalize on this economic opportunity. We can do distribution, so we can send beer out the door to make additional income. And if at the time the reasoning was, if we can get our hooks on the local people, we'll see what happens. Well, we met, we started hanging out. I'm pitching him these ideas, and he's like, you're crazy. And I said, listen, man, I said, you get one shot at this. And it was more of a pitch to his wife too at that time, because we were about 3 bottles of wine deep that night and about a 6-pack deep. Yeah,
my wife basically looked at me and said, is this something you ever want to do ever? And I thought, I really do. It's something I think that I would enjoy, whether it's my business or I'm working in another business in the brewing industry. I said, I really think I enjoy. And she basically said, we're young enough. Let's do it. Well, if we flop, we'll bounce back. And awesome. And woke up the next morning, a little fuzzy in the head, and called Caleb and said, are we really going to do this? And he said, yep. And I said, all right, before Julie changes her mind, let's do this.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so we started in essentially that was July of 2011 is when we made the Gentleman's Pact. And at this time, our third partner that we were thinking about, Jade, was a part of the picture. Jade and I had worked closely in the economic development arena in town together because he was on city council, and then he was also on my board of directors, and he and I got to talking on Sunday morning road trips around the county. We'd go drinking coffee and just talk about hopes and dreams of what we wanted to do for ourselves out here in the hills. And it made sense to all three of us once we all sat down together and started talking. And so I said, listen, this is probably going to move pretty fast, but we need to strike while the iron's hot. And we did. So in January of 2012, we formed the company. For people that are listening that are interested in the specifics, I'm going to give you my email so you can email me. If you have any, no, I'm dead serious.
Yeah,
if you have specific questions about business formulation, email me at Caleb, CALEB, at Scratchtown.beer, because there is, I think, a sensible way to go about forming a business. Maybe not the right way, but a sensible way, a way that worked for us. And that first thing you do is you form a professional services committee. And what is that? That is a good accountant that you trust, a good attorney that you trust, and a good banker that you trust. And we all know that those three are really hard to find, right? Mm-hmm. Just kidding. But not really. They are. But we were really lucky out here to have through the economic development circles, a resource team that could point you to those kinds of individuals. And we were able to find 3 great professional service providers that were able to sit us down and walk us through the process of setting up our business so that in the event something tragic would happen to one of us, or we had a falling out or whatever, that there was a seamless process in which we would go through for separation, as opposed to figuring that out down the line. But also too, like, the beer industry is heavily regulated, it's heavily taxed, has a tremendous amount of oversight, so we had to make sure that we were doing everything right as well. And those 3 individuals were super important in helping us navigate those, the red tape and the regulatory waters. The third thing I think that's important about that too is we had to get away from the scuttlebutt in town about whether or not our idea was viable. It is an endemic problem to rural communities especially, but it's a problem in American conversation right now is that none of us are dreaming big enough in this country anymore. We're not. And especially in rural communities, and we've talked about this before, there's a latent 80s farm crisis mentality that still affects a lot of decision making out here in these hills and a lot of farms around the country, and I can't blame them. I can't blame them, but it does affect a lot of rural communities' ability to dream about the future, because a lot of times they don't think they have one. And I refuse to accept that reality where we're at. And so what we were able to do is get away from that scuttlebutt and think about what kind of company we wanted to create and what kind of company that we wanted to reflect our values and what experience and product we wanted to serve. And it was interesting because a lot of people didn't agree with that, did they, Mike?
No, again, like you said, it's a carryover or hangover from the 80s. A lot of people had personal business problems. Their farm was their family business, and they had a lot of problems with that and a lot of loss and a lot of hesitance. And maybe that's, I grew up in the mid 80s, early 80s here, and maybe that's where my risk aversion came from, because that still exists around here a lot. And I think it's a self-defense mechanism that's a carryover from that. And it was something that, not that the prevailing mood of the town was going to make or break our decision, but it's definitely something we had to weigh on. Mm-hmm.
And we had to hear about it. And people, the comments were, well, nobody's going to drink that beer. How are you going to make enough money to support 3 families, now 4 in the ownership circle, and now we have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. I mean, there are a lot of questions about how we were going to make all this work. And my response to a lot of these folks was, what difference does it make to you? This is our money. It's not like we're squandering somebody else's money. And the second piece to it is you don't know what you're going to get if you don't try. The great proving grounds is the battlegrounds. Mm-hmm. We all know this, and especially with your podcast, the only way you're going to figure any of this out is by engaging and getting out there and doing it. And that's zipping the mouth and getting to work. And we just ask people to give us a chance and show us, or let us show you that we can prove ourselves to you. And we had some I think some positive feedback from that mentality, but also people were kind of paying attention to what we'd already done. We'd already been very engaged in the community, volunteering. We'd already made a few differences here and there with the work that we were doing, us collectively as an ownership circle. And we just said, just give us a chance. And the one thing that we emphasized is this isn't going to be a brew pub or a restaurant. This is going to be a production brewery. It'd be starting out as a taproom focused brewery, growing into a production brewery that was going to do one thing and one thing alone, and that was make beer. But we were going to do it to our best ability, and we were hoping that we'd do it better than everybody else. And I would say now we do, but that was a real stretch for a lot of people.
And for myself, especially growing up here, and I knew a lot of the families a lot longer, the hard part was navigating the naysayers versus the people who are trying to be protective and separating that, because sometimes their message comes across the same way.
Yeah.
And some of them are shaking their finger telling you you're wrong, and some of them are trying to protect you from screwing up. And it going through that process was about a big a learning curve as anything, at least in the first few months, for a few years.
Yeah, that was. But what we wanted, I think we're really upfront with people early on what we wanted to be and what we're going to grow up to be, and have, I think, honored that pretty religiously since we started. But the other thing we did a really good job of was we made a shit ton of homebrew, and we shared it with everybody. And that is when you started seeing attitudes change quickly. And the other thing, too, we talk about this still. I'm not saying that you throw privacy out the window, but what I am saying is that if you're trying to create something that depends on public buy-in to work, i.e. customers, you have to be transparent to a degree. And that was one thing that we were completely idealistically naive, filled, transparent with our businesses. This is what this is going to do, and this is what we're going to do. We invited people into our living room, essentially, and we were very authentic, and we bared our souls to these individuals and said, these are what our hopes and our dreams are, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what we hope to accomplish. And we created a pretty strong cheering section out of doing that. And what ended up happening is that you started to see attitudes change. And then when the buildings started going up in downtown Ord, we're right on the square in downtown Ord. That was really important for us, is to be in downtown Ord. We wanted to be at the heart of the community to make a difference from the heart on outward. And that's when things really started to change, is you started seeing people say, oh, these guys are serious. And then, being the first Sandhills brewery since Prohibition, being the first one north of the interstate, essentially between Iowa and Wyoming. When we started, there were 23 breweries in the state. Now there are 50. We had a lot to learn when we were opening, and now since then, there's been a tremendous amount of industry knowledge and learning in the state that's happened. And now we're kind of the old guys now in the industry, which is kind of funny. Middle-aged guys, right?
Yeah, right.
But when we started it, we really wanted to be focused on those core values that drove a good business, that made it successful, made it profitable, but also was endearing itself to the community in a meaningful way, because we were a community-focused brewery when we started. Now, that's changed to a degree as we started distribution. With 70% of our product now going out the door on average is not being served here in this market.
Okay.
It's being served elsewhere. But we're still a very small brewery. I mean, that's the one thing that we were intentional about when we started, and are going to continue to be intentional as we continue to go along, is we don't want a huge 500 person operation here. We want to maintain the agility and the flexibility and just frankly, the corporate ownership of the company and that's what we have, is we have 100% corporate ownership. So starting the company, we talk about a few things that are important to us. We don't have investors. We started out with no investors. We still have no investors, is that we maintain 100% corporate and creative control here. We wanted to start out as community focused, and we wanted to start by being completely beer focused. And when I say beer focused, I mean Scratchtown beer focus. So we still do those things. We still are those things. We're just a bit bigger version of that. And I think for us, it's worked out really quite magnificently. I mean, it's fit within our goals, and it's fit within our, I think our vision of what we wanted Scratchtown to be. And now, we're sitting here at year 7, and we're asking ourselves, so now what do we do? Like, now how do we evolve? How do we grow? Et cetera.
So what does that look like for you? I mean, if you can share, what do those plans look like?
One of the things I think that we acknowledge is that the proliferation of craft beer since we opened puts some systemic breaks on how much you can grow in the market. And the bigger you are, I think the harder that is. The farther away your beer is from your community, the harder it is to sell. So I think we are now coast to coast in the state of Nebraska. Our beer is distributed from Scottsbluff to Omaha. And we recognize that we want to grow within that market, but our growth strategy is going to be slow, it's going to be steady, it's going to be measured, and it's going to be meaningful. The other piece to it, I think, is that we had this conversation that growth is not just inherently monetary. There is no, I mean, we know what unbridled growth is. That's cancer, and it's dangerous and it's deadly, right? So what we wanted to do was to grow slowly, but we also wanted to ask ourselves, what are some other things that are growth related that we could do that grew our company or grew our experience or grew our happiness? And we've really focused on what I call vertical integration of the supply chain, which is going back and working with local farmers. You know, remember before we even opened, we had the young farmers of Valley County in our tap room talking about inputs to grow for beer, and it wasn't them. I use young in quotations because I think the average age was 50. I'm not kidding you. That's their group, is the young Valley County farmers group. And those guys, they started it when they were in their 20s and now in their 50s. Well, their kids went out and started hop yards, are growing malting barley, are running apiaries, which is where you farm bees for the honey. And you're starting to see this realization that you can do some on-farm diversification and plug into your local brewery and actually make a little bit of money. And that was one thing from a growth standpoint that we wanted to see, is it wasn't just necessarily our growth, but in concentric rings around our activity, you saw that ancillary growth happen, and that's happened with 2 commercial hop yards in Valley County now. You've got malting barley going on 35 miles south of us, and we've got an apiary in Burwell, which is 15 miles north of us, that we source almost all of the honey we use. No, all of the honey we use, and that's hundreds and hundreds of pounds of honey a year. And then there's a roastery up in Burwell we use for our coffee-based beers. So you're seeing that. That's the kind of growth that I want to continue to be involved in, because if we operate well, if we run a financially responsible, income-producing business, and we mind the 5 things that we talk about here at the brewery all the time that are important to us on what we do as a company, we're going to see growth. We're going to see growth.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we've kind of had to work with people too is growth isn't necessarily a bigger building or a bigger brew system or, you know, the visual things. We have a lot of the same equipment we started with. We have a lot of the same people we've started with. We've added production. We've added our range where we're at, and you can,
and employees.
Yes, you can you can grow without it being something you have to see with your eyes. You know, our business has grown in different ways that I think a lot of people have a hard time.
And even though, I mean, we've added real estate, we've added probably 100-fold increase in our keg fleet. You know, we started out where Mike and I were the only 2 full-time employees here, and we did everything, production and front of the house, to the point where it was like 90, 100-hour work weeks the first 2 years, to the point of almost like disaster. I mean, honestly, I mean, we almost killed ourselves, not each other. I mean, it was like Han and Chewie in the Millennium Falcon. We laugh about that a lot. I mean, we call our brewery the Millennium Falcon. It may not look like much, but it's the fastest ship in the galaxy. Awesome. You know, our brewery may not look like much to an outsider, but I think it's the best brewery in the state of Nebraska. And it, in my opinion, was the necessary path you had to go to learn your licks. I mean, that was one thing that, like, for me was really important, was that we had to learn the hard way. We had to get out and we had to hustle. We learned everything about this business up and down. And it's a lot easier to educate, to train, and bring on employees when you can say, I did that, and I also scrubbed toilets at the end of the night after working 16 hours. So don't tell me you can't do it. And I think there's a level of legitimacy. Yeah, we're self-trained in what we did, But to be able to build the company we have, there's legitimacy that comes with that posture and that attitude. And it's been, for us, I don't know if I'd ever do it any other way. But at the time, I mean, it was hard. I mean, those first 2 years, I barely have like a waking memory of it. It just seems like a dream state for like 2 years. And it was funny because my wife was talking to me about, our birthday today, over the breakfast table this morning. And she said, well, do you have any regrets? And I said, the only regret I have were the regrets that were unintentional, based off of the realization that, holy shit, we just had a baby. Our baby is Scratchtown, and it's going to require all of our attention, all of our sacrifice, all of our needs right now to grow this baby up, to get it on its 2 legs and get it walking. And I said, otherwise, no. Like we're spending the prime of our lives together, doing something that we love with the ownership circle, which is also my best friends. And we're still, after 8 years in January, the company's been around, and we're still together. Like that, to me, that's growth.
That's awesome.
As the amount of growth that it took as a human being to get to that point in time, to navigate the complex experiences that are in a partnership, to navigate how to make payroll, to navigate how to balance, in a business, cash flow is one of the most important aspects you have to learn, because if you don't have money coming in when you're paying out for materials to make, beer, well, you can probably figure out that's not going to last very long. Those are all things that we grew. And what I think, looking into the future, I want to be more mission driven in the solar installation that we're doing that's going to power 80% of our brewery here on Monday. That's happening Monday.
Wow, that's cool.
I want to do things like get deeper with native Nebraska vines, fruit-bearing brambles, to do fruit beers and other types of mixed fermentation projects. I want to work more with Nebraska farmers that look at a diversified world as the future of agriculture and how they can produce things for us. And I think the financial opportunity comes with that.
Awesome. We're starting to run out of time. I don't want to keep you guys too long. I do want to jump back to kind of the failures that you experienced firsthand. And I think guys like us, we see failures and we see them as a positive down the road, right? They suck during the time, but we learned lessons, and that's why we where we are. So you definitely talked about the .com. Tell us a little bit about that, and then Mike, if you've got anything that comes to mind about how that helped make great decisions when it came to opening this business.
Yeah, so right out of college, I went to work for a .com that was outdoor outfitter and online retailer, and we shipped all over the globe. And it was a very small company, a very agile company that was going through a growth phase, and they hired me on as a promotions manager to manage the online store and promote the online store, and then also do gear testing and go outside and play and all this other fun stuff, which I got to do and was a great part of the job. But you could start seeing the wheels come off the bus about a year and a half into the business. And the business owner started making some serious decisions that did not conform with reality. Is that our competitors were upping their online presence, their sophistication of their online tool, their website, or we're starting to get into cell phones at this time, and the mobile applications are coming along. They're investing and doubling down on their delivery mechanism to their customers. And I started seeing these irrational decisions being made and a tremendous amount of capital being pulled out of the business by the owner for what I felt at the time and turned out to be essentially basically just marketing ploys or terrible plays for the business that didn't make us any money, like sponsoring adventure racing teams, getting into apparel manufacturing in China with our logo and brand on it. Nobody knew who the hell we were. I mean, the fact that I can say OutTech and probably 3 people that will listen to this podcast may even remotely remember this company existing in downtown Lincoln for a time. But the reality is that there were a number of poor business decisions being made that didn't conform with reality, and the amount of money going out the door, it became very apparent to me that when in a failure situation, people start making more and more irrational decisions about their business and about their life that don't pair well with, one, dealing with the issue at hand, which is your competitor at that time. Our competitors are becoming more sophisticated and pumping more money into their online platforms, because this is before Amazon blew up. This is all happening in the early 2000s. This is where all online retail now is a megalith. It's a behemoth. You know what I mean? At that time, it was still a cute bolt-on that Walmart was talking about doing. You know what I mean? Now it's totally changed the entire experience of brick and mortar in all of the United States of America, right? So we're sitting here talking about doubling down, and the office manager and the promotions manager, myself, are saying we really need to double down on the technology. We need to build a better widget that's selling more product around the globe. We need to do this, X, Y, and Z. And he's like, nope, we're going to do this adventure racing thing. We're going to get people excited about the brand, and we're going to do that. And it blew up. The second piece of that failure, after watching all these irrational decisions being made, turned out to be, the second thing that it turned out to be was, then what do you do as a man and as a provider when you're not providing? And how do you deal with yourself as a man in a marriage with a kid, dealing with the new car payment, etc., and starting to unwind all of those weird experiences about being displaced from the workforce at 24 years of age. And that was the failure that I needed. As I tell Mike, when I got laid off, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me in retrospect. And it forced me to really take a long look at myself in the mirror and say, how am I going to make myself indisposable to whatever I choose to do from here on out?
Yeah, and like he said, my failure wasn't so much of the business, because the business that I worked at was still going on. To me, it was more of a failure of what I thought life was going to be. Life was going to be, you get your college degree, you get your job at the company that you're going to work at, you're going to make good money and move up the thing. And again, to touch on what he did, you get laid off no matter how hard you work, if sometimes it's not enough. And coming to terms with that. And I had 2 young children at the time. And sitting at home, I would take care of the kids during the day, but also try to do job interviews and things like that. And there's just not a lot out there. So coming to terms with okay, so this is what my life's path was going to be. This is what again, you're only 20 something at the time. To me, that's young looking back. But what do we do? How do we maintain the family? How do we move forward from this? And at the same time, again, in dealing with some family loss and things like that, it was a struggle. And I always hate when someone says, "Oh, it's the best thing that ever happened to you." In hindsight, yes. At the time, it was a punch in the gut. And it was a punch in the gut every day I got up. But it was one of those things that you grow from. You have to, if you're going to survive. And learning from that and figuring out, okay, what's important? Is it important that we have this car and this house and this? No. Is it important that I get to be with my family these days of the week? Is it important that my kids get to see me work hard and see the result of my hard work? It's kind of a refocusing of what I thought was important.
Well, I want to build on that and maybe tie it all up with this, is those failures that we both went through made us realize that the American dream, that was the horseshit American dream, excuse my French, and I love America, I want to make this clear, that our grandparents' generation and our parents' generation fed us as the way you should go out in the world and do things, is gone. It's gone. You have to do things differently in America today to get ahead. You have to take a step back. Maybe college isn't the right direction for you to go because you don't want to pay student loans for the rest of your life. There's so much that's unobtainable that was obtainable 30, 40, 50 years ago because the dynamic of the country has changed. Right, wrong, or indifferent. What hasn't changed is our attitude about what you should do once you get out of high school. You go to college, you get a trade, or you go in the military, you start a family. That's not the right path anymore. I think that people need to take a step back and think hard for themselves about what they want to look like and what they want to look at in the mirror in 50 years' time, rather than listening to all the other voices that tell you what you should do when they're not the ones that have to live with the outcome of that advice.
I think another piece of that is not asking an 18-year-old child to know what the rest of their life is.
Correct. I agree with you.
I think that's one of the most detrimental things that this country has done is telling a kid that gets out of high school at 18, okay, what are you going to do?
And I still tell I agree with Mike 100%. I still tell my kids, this is one of the many things that I'm going to do in my life. My partners know that I want to start 1 or 2 more companies by the time I'm 60 years old. Like at some point in time, I'm going to do some other things that are probably going to be very related to Scratchtown, but they're going to be little side gigs, like I was talking about with, the native Nebraska ingredients for fermentation. Those are the things that I think we've gotten into a habit of telling people that life is a linear path to death, when in fact life is not. And we have got to stop force feeding adults for that matter, to think that there's some perfect evolutionary transition to a linear life that gets you from point A to point B, and B is death. I think that's a horrible, horrible thing we're doing, and an injustice in this country. And it's that American dream that's broken, in my opinion, that I was talking about. It's not like that anymore. I think that aberration that was post-World War II, pre-1990s, that was an aberration. You read back to all the histories of the people that came out here and broke the sod and built America, and they were doing the same side hustles and the same type of thing that we're now talking about in the gig economy. It's kind of funny, if you ask me. It's reverted, I think, back to the way that it used to be. And I'm not going to sit here and say that all those things are good. But what I am saying is that if we don't evolve as a society to accommodate the changes that are fundamental in this country, we're going to have a lot of people falling off. We already have a lot of people, in my opinion, falling off. So the advice I give to people is don't listen to conventional wisdom. And first, go out and get a trade. Learn how to do something with your hands. That will follow you the rest of your life. My environmental studies major might not. You know what I mean? A lot of the elements there will, but overall, I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, this has been an excellent conversation. I can't wait to put this out. I guess just my final question is, you've said you're coast to coast in Nebraska, so people can go to their local bar, local grocer, see if they can get Scratchtown. What if they go to their bar and they don't have Scratchtown? How can they potentially get you in their town?
Well, that's a great question, Josh. I appreciate that very much, because I would like to give you that answer. What they can do is they can ask what distributor that those bars or those restaurants work with, and then they can contact us at Scratchtown Brewing Company here. You can go to scratchtown.beer. There's a Contact Us tab right there on the front page at www.scratchtown.beer. That comes to me directly. I will answer those emails, and then if you want to send me, a joke or a funny little story too, I'll answer that as well. But get into contact with me, and then Shay and I, we handle all of our outside distribution, fulfillment, and sales, and we'll make sure that we connect with that that on-premise account or off-premise account, and make sure that we get beer that direction.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for doing this. This is awesome. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
We're going to put on a little party tonight. I can't wait. So thanks for having us out, and thanks for doing this interview, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good one.